When you think deeply about this, that the world is perfectly imperfect, that all the things that happen here are actually beautiful, the beautiful things and even the not so beautiful things, all of them are beautiful because all of them are giving me an opportunity to orientate myself towards eternity. Then what happens is the spiritualist finds peace even in chaos. So yeah, just a little bit about my journey. Just firstly, from the onset, I just wanted to say that although I'm here, I'm sitting on a stage and all of you are in seats and it's a little bit structured and in one sense formal here, I'd really like this evening to be pretty informal. I'm sure many of you have thoughts and feelings and emotions and different things that you're going through in your life at the moment. And spaces like this are incredible because they're a place in which you can bring all your questions, all your perhaps confusions, dilemmas, hopes, fears, dreams about life. And here we can kind of, in each other's company, discuss it through a spiritual lens and see what greater wisdom we can mine between us. So yeah, just from the onset to say that this is a team game. So like, please be with us fully here. And I won't speak for too long, maybe for 15, 20 minutes. And then I'll kind of open it out and see if we can have a discussion amongst ourselves. A little bit about my journey. I grew up in London. My parents are from India, but I grew up in London. I grew up, I guess, in a pretty affluent family and had everything I could ever desire. People who are surrounded with prosperity in one sense, 2 cars, 2 phones, 2 houses, maybe too much. But I guess when I was about 15, questions began coming to my mind, my heart, about the future, about my goals, about my purpose, about success and happiness, and what I wanted to do with my time that I've got in this world. And so at the age of about 15, I began reading different wisdom books. And amongst them, I read the Bhagavad Gita, which I'll try to share a little with you today. And that kind of became the focus of my study. And 30 years later, I'm still studying that book, along with many other traditions and teachers. And yeah, it kind of just captured my imagination, not just the depth of the philosophy, but the practicality of it as well. Because I had read a lot of philosophy, but it was kind of like, yeah, that sounds good, but how does it change my life when I wake up tomorrow morning? And what I really appreciated about the Eastern wisdom I was contacting was that it was giving me deep principles, but also transformational practices. And therefore, what I try to do now is share wisdom. I call it wisdom that breathes, wisdom that's applicable, and wisdom which really benefits you on every level. So yeah, I began reading, studying, engaging with the monks. My dad said, watch out for those guys in orange. You know, they might get into your head. I was like, don't worry, Dad, I'm very balanced, you know. Anyway, clearly he had a hunch that was true. So yeah, I started associating with monks, asking questions, and then at 18 I went to university. And I studied in London at University College London. I wanted to study philosophy, but I was convinced to do something that would get me a proper job. And so I ended up studying computer science and management. Through my university years, I guess I was also seeing 2 approaches to life. That brought me a lot of insight as well. And when I was 21, I did something which I think I would recommend to every single person. And I realized at the age of 21 that my whole life I had been surrounded by opinions, expectations, trends, and traditions. And while some of that is useful, I realized that some of that was so loud around me that I wasn't really hearing my own heart. And therefore at 21 I realized I need to go into a different environment. I need to disconnect from my normal surroundings. I need to go to a place where I can be challenged to think in a more creative way about my own life. And so at the age of 21 I kind of ejected myself from London and arrived in India and traveled around for 6 months, exploring, questioning, introspecting, and I guess that's where I found my calling to try and deepen my own spirituality and then share that with others. So at the end of that year, at the age of 21, I came back to London and I said, "Mom, I think I want to become a monk." What? So that was an interesting stage of my life. Another lesson I learned is that sometimes to follow your calling, you may also sometimes have to face challenge. There are people in your life that you want to please, but there's also a calling within yourself that you want to follow, and sometimes they don't integrate. And so to follow our purpose sometimes requires some risk, some bravery, some courage. So I became a monk at the age of 21, and what can I say? The rest is history. I've been a monk now for about 25 years, and I come in front of you not as someone who knows it all, not by any means, but perhaps on my journey I've picked up some wisdom that could perhaps help to at least trigger some thoughts within you and help us all move towards a more conscious life. So that's a little bit about me. And I guess I'll share some thoughts with you today, and let's see where we go. Before we begin, often when we begin a spiritual discourse, we just spend a few moments just in a prayer of gratitude. It's said that gratitude is the mother of all qualities. My monk mentor used to say to me, there's one equation that you need to correct in your life. And he said the basic miscalculation that we all have is that we undervalue what we have and we overvalue what we don't have. And he used to say to me every morning, try to correct that miscalculation and life will look very, very different. And so much of our life is about gratitude. So before we begin like a spiritual discourse, we just take a few moments to offer gratitude to our teachers and offer gratitude for just being here. Often we think perfection is in the future or perfection was in the past, the good old days. But actually, perfection is in the present. It's perfect. We're here right now. It's already perfect. So today we're talking a little bit about the material world that we're living in. The material world that we're surrounded by. And a world that we wish we were in control of, but often we're not in control of. Life throws up so many things every single day, the good, the bad, and the ugly. When we wake up in the morning, there are certain things that we never planned to happen, but things happen. And so why is this world the way it is? Why is the world so unpredictable? Why is the world constantly changing? That's sometimes a question which may frustrate us, and a question which we may ask in our hearts, why is the world wired like this? And so today I'll share some thoughts with you. But before we do that, I just want you to close your eyes for a minute. And I just want you to, in your mind's eye, try to picture a beautiful person that appeared in your life, or you can picture a beautiful scene of some point in your life, Or perhaps you can picture a beautiful moment that you experienced in your life. Anyone like to shout out a word that beauty brought to their mind?
Bliss.
Bliss. That's a nice word. Yeah. A feeling of heightened happiness beyond the norm. Yes, very good. Another one? Small. When I was a kid, I was just driving past the ocean today because our temple is right near the ocean. And as a kid, I loved to go to the ocean. Not because I was good at swimming, definitely not. Not because I like building sandcastles or going on the amusement rides, but as a kid, I loved to go in front of the ocean because sometimes just faced with the vastness of the ocean, you just felt really, really small. And that insignificance I found to actually be incredibly liberating. Because in front of the ocean and the vastness of the ocean, perceiving my own infinitesimal size made me realize maybe I don't need to take it that seriously. Maybe my problems, maybe my anxieties, maybe my fears are not that important. Thank you. To feel small is actually beautiful in one sense. Thank you. Anything else? How did the beauty make you feel, or how would you encapsulate it in a word?
Absorbed.
Absorbed. That's a beautiful one, isn't it? In the world today, to be absorbed and present in the moment is so difficult. So much of our life is in the past or the future. Therefore, you have books like The Power of Now. Because to live in the present, I was mentioning to a group yesterday, why do you think people do extreme sports? Because when you go up into the air and you jump out of a helicopter, you ain't thinking about what you're going to eat tomorrow. I can guarantee you that. And you ain't going to be thinking about what happened to you yesterday, because in that moment, you are in the moment. And therefore, to find absorption in this world is very, very difficult, actually, because we are perpetually out of sync with life. And so beauty helps us to find absorption and be in that very moment. Thank you so much. That's a nice one. Anyone else? Safe. Security. Feeling like you're in your element. That's very beautiful, because we're constantly fearful, actually, in life. Actually, in the Bhagavad Gita, one of the ancient commentators says the very first verse and the very final verse of the Bhagavad Gita, the wisdom that Krishna is giving is, do not fear. And the commentator says, because fear is the basic human condition. We're fearful about our health, we're fearful about relationships, we're fearful about what happened in the past, we're fearful about what will happen in the future. When we're happy, we're fearful it will end. When we're not happy, we're fearful it will never end. Constantly fearing, but in the moment, we perceive beauty and we feel safe in the moment. Thank you. One more?
Connection.
Okay, two? Yes? Connection. That's a beautiful one as well. Yeah, sometimes we're so surrounded by so many things, but we're actually disconnected. One young girl, she wrote a poem called The Paradoxes of Our Time, and she said, we have taller buildings but shorter tempers. We have wider highways but narrower minds. We've conquered outer space, but we're struggling with inner space. We've multiplied our possessions but reduced our values. We have more degrees but less sense. We lose our health to get wealth, and then we spend that wealth to get our health back. And then she says, we're more and more connected, but further and further apart. Isn't that amazing? They call it in the world today crowded loneliness. Surrounded by people, but feeling extremely disconnected. And so to actually feel connection with people, to feel connection with your environment, that's actually a very amazing thing. So, thank you. Wow, you guys are like good. These are good words. Amazing. Thank you. Well, there was one more here. Someone said something.
Amazed.
Amazed. Yeah, we want our mind to be expanded. Beauty is wonderful because it helps us to realize that there's something more than what we knew about. One of the greatest things in life is to constantly be widening our experience of what's possible in this world. And that makes for the most dynamic life. And therefore, to be amazed is a beautiful emotion because it helps us to realize, oh, there's more than what I knew about. And that means there could be even more than what I now know about. And like that, we expand our vision. So amazement is also a beautiful experience. Yeah, so like these, you have these different words, and beauty in the world actually awakens all these experiences. But then would you say there are things in your life which aren't so beautiful? If I asked you, do you feel the world is perfectly beautiful or imperfectly ugly sometimes as well? Do you feel there's some imperfection in the world? Or do you feel the world is perfect? Let's do a survey here, and no one's allowed to sit on the fence. Do you believe the world is perfect? Option A. Or do you believe the world is imperfect? Option B. And you can't sit on the fence. Okay, if you believe the world is perfect, stand up now. Oh yeah, they were just waiting for you to stand up. Okay, now stay standing. We want to see how many of you believe the world is perfect. Okay then. Okay, yes, please sit down. And if you believe the world is imperfect, stand up now. Okay, we're voting with our feet. No one sitting on the fence there for sure. Okay, so you believe the world is imperfect. Thank you. It's an interesting question. How would the ancient sages answer this question? Is the world perfect or imperfect? Clearly, there are things in the world which are not so nice. I was just at the World Economic Forum in Davos, so there's so much talk about the world and the state of the world that we're living in. And one presenter was explaining, if you have food in your fridge, if you have a roof over your head, and if you have clothes on your back, you are more fortunate than 75% of people in this world. The presenter was saying that if you have money in your bank, or even some loose change in your pocket, or Apple Pay on your phone, then you are amongst the 7%, the 7% of richest people in the world. If you can read, then you're more fortunate than nearly 2 billion people in this world who can't. And like this, he was actually explaining that we live in a world which is full of so many challenges and so much strife. So is this world perfect or not perfect? Before you can answer this question, there's one other question that you have to ask. Can anyone think of what that question may be? What question do you have to ask, or what point do you have to establish before you can find the answer to the question of whether this world is perfect or not?
What's the definition of perfect?
What's the definition of perfect? I thought someone might say that. Okay, good. Yeah?
How do you measure perfection?
How do you measure perfection? Okay.
Perfection what?
Perfection in what? Yeah, so similar. How do you define perfection? Anything else?
Am I perfect or not?
Am I perfect? Okay.
It's expressed by this way.
Why does this world even exist? That's where every single spiritual tradition begins. Because unless you know the purpose of something, how can you then decode whether it's perfect or not? Something is perfect if it's perfect for its purpose. And therefore, spiritual teachers tell us the very first question in life that we have to ask is, why do we exist here in the first place? One English writer says, there's only one pressing question, which is, why the heck am I here? So, this is actually where spiritual tradition begins, by asking the question, what is the purpose of the world? If you don't understand the purpose of the world, then there's a very good chance that we may not understand the beauty in the things that we see around us, because we don't know what the world is trying to achieve. So why are we here? The Bhagavad Gita in the 15th chapter gives a beautiful analogy to explain the world we're living in. I don't know how many of you have been to countries where there are banyan trees. Do you have banyan trees? Not in this country, no. Banyan trees are incredible. They have many, many branches, and their roots go down, and the roots go down, and sometimes the roots can spread for miles. So the banyan tree is an extremely complex tree. And the Bhagavad Gita explains the Sanskrit word for banyan tree is ashvatha. And ashvatha in Sanskrit etymologically means that which will not be here tomorrow. In other words, a temporary place. And what the Bhagavad Gita explains is that there's a banyan tree, you can picture it, and then there's a river, and then there's a reflection of the banyan tree. And what this material world is a reflection of that reality. According to the Bhagavad Gita, this world that we're living in is almost like a virtual reality. Welcome to the Matrix, as they say. It's real, this is real, but it's temporary. And everything we see in this world and the imperfection we see in it actually has its eternal and perfect counterpart in another reality or another dimension of existence beyond this world. So just sit with that thought for a minute. So why does this world then exist? Why would you even have a reflection? So according to the sages of the East, the world is wired in such a way to help us realize that we are not material beings. We're living in the material world, but we're actually spiritual beings. And the idea of the material world is that everything that goes on here is an opportunity for us to begin questioning, am I really meant to be here? And is there something, or is there some nature beyond this world that I belong to? Now, do you begin to see how there's perfection in the world we're living in? Because what the ancient sages explain is that the world is perfectly imperfect. In other words, all the imperfection of life, all the disappointments, all the obstacles, all the ups and downs, all the twists and turns, all the temporality, all the letdowns, all of that is part of the beauty of the world. Because the world is perfectly imperfect. The Bhagavad Gita explains that this world and everything we go through in this world is an opportunity to actually begin to orientate our consciousness towards eternity, towards a place that we're actually meant to be, where we can find real happiness and fulfillment. And so the Christian writer C.S. Lewis once said, if I find in myself a desire which no experience of this world can fulfill, I must conclude I was made for another world. Now, when you think deeply about this, that the world is perfectly imperfect, that all the things that happen here are actually beautiful, the beautiful things and even the not so beautiful things, all of them are beautiful because all of them are giving me an opportunity to orientate myself towards eternity. Then what happens is the spiritualist finds peace even in chaos. One writer says, peace is not the absence of chaos. Peace is the presence of divinity in every situation. I'll say that again. Peace is not the absence of chaos or problems. Peace is the presence of divinity in every situation. And so what most people are doing is they're trying to find peace in the world, but they're trying to do it in the wrong way. What most people are basically trying to do is control all of their external environments to make it as steady as possible, as controlled as possible, as much within the predictability of their consciousness as possible. But eventually it breaks down because we're not meant to control the world. So the sages say, instead of spending all your time and energy trying to control the external world, the wise people control the inner world. And what they do is they begin to see divinity within every situation. And then what happens is it doesn't actually matter what happens to you. They say we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And so our experience of life is all down to the vision that we have of life. And so what we're basically doing here through all these mantras, through these discussions, through all the spiritual practices, is we're actually basically what we're doing is inner engineering. Just to borrow the term from Sadhguru. Thank you. It's a good term. Inner engineering. Because everyone's trying to engineer the world, engineer their life, engineer every single situation, engineer their partner, engineer so many things. But the real engineering we need to do is the inner engineering. And so finding peace in chaos is not some magical technique to control everything around you. But it's the deep consciousness and understanding that everything that I'm going through in my life, I'm meant to go through. Imagine if I asked you the question, who in this room wouldn't want to change one thing in their life? The moment you can put your hand up, that means your inner engineering is complete. Because the inner engineered person who has developed spiritual consciousness realizes not everything in life that happens is good, but something good can come from everything that happens in life. And if we're able to embed that simple understanding within ourselves, our entire experience of reality will be transformed. And so finding peace in chaos is all about changing our vision. And these are some of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita in terms of how to weather the unpredictability, weather the storm and the unpredictability of the world we're living in today. So I'm just going to do one exercise and then I'm going to open it up. What we usually do is when we give out these philosophical points is sometimes like a lot of information there. So what we often tell people to do is just speak to the person next to you and just say one thing, one thought that was triggered within you just in the discussion we've had so far, just literally like for 1 minute. Just share with each other one thing that came to your mind, and perhaps think of a question you may have. So then I'll just allow you to speak to each other just for 1 minute, and then we'll kind of open up and have a discussion. Is that okay? Yeah? So please share with the person next to you just one thought that came to your mind, or one kind of epiphany or realization. You can do it in 2s or 3s or whatever, that came to your mind, and just think of any questions you may have. Yeah. All right, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for enthusiastically sharing with each other. We have about 10 or 15 minutes, and I don't want to do this in such a structured way, just to kind of throw it out to you. Do you have any perhaps thoughts that you'd like to share, or a question or something that I said which maybe triggered something within you that you'd like to know more about? Then we can kind of dive into a bit of a discussion. Is that a hand? Yeah, sure.
I wanted to ask about anger. So if I express it, others get hurt. If I don't express it, I feel hurt. What's the solution?
Yeah. So, anger. So in anger management, it's said that there are 2 extremes. One is to lock it up, which means you repress it, and then you become like a pressure cooker, and then eventually it comes out. And the other extreme is to let it loose, just immediately in that moment, just express yourself and let it all out. And both are definitely discouraged, and we see that in our own experience. The ancient scriptures talk about the gift of the gap. And the gift of the gap is the ability to feel an emotion, but not feel impelled to, in that moment, act upon it. When we feel intense emotions, whether it's anger, whether it's even excitement, what is recommended is just to sit with those emotions for some time. Oftentimes when I'm angry, I write an email to someone, but I don't send it. In that moment, just writing it makes you feel better, like, yeah, I've written it, I've expressed myself, but don't send it. You've said what you need to say, but we'll send it tomorrow, it's fine. And by the time you look at it tomorrow, you're like, yeah, maybe I don't need to send that, it's all right. The gift of the gap. The other thing that really helps is just to process your emotions by speaking to someone else. R.S. Trapp says, it's difficult to see the picture when you're inside the frame. And so just having another person to be able to help us understand our own emotional chaos helps us to see something that we can't see. So that can also help. Is that okay? The Bhagavad Gita explains in a beautiful verse, Bhumirapo nalo vayu kamano buddhirevacha ahankara iti yamme bhinna prakritirashtadha. So explain that this world is made up of 8 elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, which are the gross elements, and then there are 3 subtle elements: mind, intelligence, and ego. Everything in creation is a combination of these material elements. And therefore this material world is real. It is real. We're here. We're experiencing things. But the material world is said to be temporary. It's a temporary reality. The material world is almost like a university, a cosmic university, where we come to learn lessons. The ancient scriptures go on to speak about concepts like reincarnation and karma. Karma is the way in which we learn things in the world. For every action, there's a reaction. And therefore, this whole world is an opportunity to elevate our understanding. What happens is when people go through experiences in life, they focus on how it makes them feel, which is natural. But the spiritual way to approach everything is whenever you go through an emotion, an event, or an experience, don't just ask yourself, how does this make me feel? Ask yourself, what am I supposed to learn? Right? When you add that question to every single thing you go through, you begin to see everything in a different way. And so the material world is real, but it's temporary. It's a cosmic university where we learn lessons to then eventually reach our true nature, which is beyond the material. Okay. Yes?
How do we, like, I find it, like, I understand all this stuff, but sometimes I find it very hard to sort of connect to this idea of staying connected with God. Like, I find that I can probably digest, or like sitting with God for a little while and showing my gratefulness and do my prayers. But then when I join the rat race again, and I'm back in what we call the material world, where, you know, people are just out to get each other, everyone for themselves. We're just prized by how materially successful we are.
Then it becomes more difficult to connect.
And then I feel like I can't see divinity within others either, because you almost feel like it's just about you surviving and that's it. Like, you feel kind of like my spiritual journey is just about me. It's not about, it can't include anyone else because I can't see God in anyone else. It's so difficult.
Yeah, so how do you detect divinity everywhere? I mentioned that point, seeing divinity everywhere in every situation. Such a nice question, thank you. The ancient teacher, his name is Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he explains that people approach divinity on different levels. The lowest, or perhaps I wouldn't say the lowest, but the preliminary way of approaching divinity is, in Sanskrit, he says bhaya, and that means fear. God fearing, divinity fearing. We kind of approach some kind of divinity or spiritual path because we're just like, just keep him happy, you know, like, otherwise he's going to throw down a thunderbolt on me. He says beyond that is asha. Asha in Sanskrit means desire. We approach a divinity because we want something. I want a house by the sea, color TV, through spirituality. So we approach the divinity because we want something. And he says higher than that is when we approach divinity kartavya. That means out of a sense of gratitude and duty, obligation. Divinity has already done so much for me. Thank you, dear Lord, for providing our daily bread. And therefore we feel impelled to connect with divinity out of gratitude. But he says higher than that is when you connect with divinity, prema, out of love. You can actually fall in love with God, fall in love with divinity. And when you love someone, it's natural to think about them in all times, places, and circumstances. Right? I'm sure some of you have been in love. And when you're in love and you're separated by time and space, your hearts are still very much meeting in thoughts of each other. You don't have to force yourself, because it just becomes very natural to think about the person who has enchanted your heart the most. And therefore, for most people, spirituality is just part of their life, because their connection with divinity is usually based on fear, desire, or obligation. And therefore, most of what we see as spirituality in the world is quite transactional. But the highest and most evolved and purest type of spirituality is when we connect with divinity out of love. And then it becomes very, very natural to perceive divinity in everyone and everything. Is that okay? Much more can be said, just something. Thank you. Nice question. Yes?
Someone who's just started to believe in God and go down that journey, and to put your request out there to God for things that you want in your life in the future, and then the next day it's just stripped from you completely. How do you maintain that faith in God that it's not against you and it's actually for you? How do you keep your faith in the process when it's what you wanted wasn't delivered, it was actually taken away? So how do you look at that and say, thank you, God, even though deep down you're really disappointed by the outcome?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that's really nice questions. So life doesn't always go to plan, and they say if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And he seems to sometimes turn it all upside down. And how do we maintain our faith in those times? If we're a little introspective, then the first thing we realize is that sometimes my plans, my desires, weren't the best plans or the best desires. A man and woman were once married. They had their 50th wedding anniversary. They were both 70. So the genie appeared and said, "Congratulations, it's your 50th wedding anniversary." So he looked at the man and said, "Anything you desire?" He said, "Yes. I wish my wife was 20 years younger than me." Vump, he became 90. It's like, no, there must be some mistake here. No, you wanted it. See, sometimes our desires, our plans can get us into more trouble. The Dalai Lama once said, it can be an incredible stroke of luck to not get what you want. Saint Teresa of Avila said, more tears were shed from prayers that were answered than from prayers that were unanswered. So the first thing is divinity is like a chess player. 100 moves ahead. And sometimes divinity is moving the pieces and we're just like, where are you going with this? But we have to understand there's something happening here, a master plan. One Christian monk says, "God, I prayed to you for love, and you just sent me people who needed help. I prayed for wisdom, and you just kept sending me problems. I prayed for strength, and you just sent more and more turmoil in my life. Now I realize you gave me everything I needed and nothing that I wanted." So I think the first thing is to understand that we don't always have the best plan. That humility, that detachment, that open-mindedness. And the second thing I would say is we have a chronic tendency to judge everything in the moment. Right? Djokovic said, "I won 80% of the matches that I played in. But when you look at all the points, I only won 50% of the points." In other words, you can lose 50% of the points, but still win 80% of the matches, because a point is just a point. And every point leads to another point. And so the idea of the spiritualist is they're able to not judge things in the moment, but accept things in the moment and keep playing the game. And by playing the game, they say you have to live life looking forwards, but sometimes you can only understand it looking backwards. So, through introspection, through journaling, one thing I've done is, I never thought I would journal. I was like, that's what teenage kids do when they got a crush on someone. I was like, I'm not going to diary. But one of the monks told me to do it, so I started journaling. I have 25 years of journals now. So oftentimes what I do in the evening is I go into my journal. It's on a password protected file on my computer. I go into my journal and I look, what did I write on this day 10 years ago? What did I write on this day 20 years ago? And it's fascinating. Because you have to live life going forwards, but you can understand it looking backwards. You realize at every moment my life was being engineered and moved in a perfect way beyond my own comprehension. Hope that helps. Okay, so are we okay for time? Yeah, one more. Okay, you get the last one.
Thank you. That leads nicely to a question about destiny and free will. If our karma keeps us in a cycle of action and reaction, do we really have free will, or is it just part of the perfect engineering?
The free will question. Do we have free will? Yes. They say where there's a will, there's a relative. No, I'm joking. Where there's a will, there's a way. If we didn't have free will, life would not really make sense, right? Like if we didn't have volition, if we didn't have the power to choose, if we didn't have an ability to change the course of our life, then we would almost become just like robots in the game. So according to Eastern teachers, definitely we have free will. But we don't have complete control over the consequences of our free will. That is karma. So therefore, life is an interplay of fate and free will. At every moment, so like say for example, I'm on this stage. So I made decisions which brought me to this stage. So this stage is my karma. And I was brought to this karma because of my free will. But now I'm on the stage, I'm exercising my free will again. And according to how I exercise my free will on this stage, that will create my next stage. And then once I'm on that stage, I have free will again. And then how I react to it there will... So do you see that we're constantly redefining and redesigning our destiny? This is incredibly powerful because what it means is that at any point in your life, you have the power to say, this is not how the story is going to end. You can turn it around. And so the very fact that we have free will makes life so empowering. So according to Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, there's only one thing in your life that divinity gives you and will never take away. And that is free will. But once we've utilized our free will, then other factors will come in, karma, to then decide the outcome of what comes from that free will. Do you want to respond to that?
Yes.
You do want to respond to that. No, I sense that. Yes, please do respond.
But you can have two people making the same exact choice.
Right.
And they'll have different consequences.
Yeah, because they have a different karmic bank balance. So say for example, so there's basically an action. Added on top of that action is the intention. And added on top of that are previous actions or karma. So karma plus intention plus action decides the consequence. So two people may do the same action, but their intention may be different. But two people may do the same action and have the same intention, but their karma may be different. And therefore, although seemingly like two people might try to be, I don't know, the next Instagram influencer. Like me, love me, follow me. Just put it out there. Two people, it's interesting. I mean, social media is an interesting one. It's amazing what goes viral. You put out a reel, you're like, this is definitely going to go viral. And it's just like, it just falls flat, you know, it's like, no, it didn't work. And then you look at someone, how could that go viral? Like, what's up with that? It's interesting. There's factors beyond your control. So, karma plus intention plus action equals consequence. And so, therefore we have free will to perform the action and the intention. But then there is a karmic bank balance that we're living with, which is then affecting the outcome. And that's why we don't know. And that's why never judge yourself on the result. The whole world judges their sense of self-worth based on the result. but you're not in control of the result. Therefore, if you're wise, instead of judging your success on results, the best thing to judge yourself on is your effort and your endeavor. If you try to do something to the best of your ability, with nobility, with character, with good intention, you're already a success. It doesn't matter what the result is, because you're not in control of the result. You're always in your life make goals which are connected to effort and endeavor. Never make goals which are connected to result. That's a sure formula to make yourself depressed. So people say, like, my goal in life is to earn X amount of dollars. That's a terrible goal on many fronts. But just in this example, a better goal would be, my goal in life is to develop these skills, learn this, and try this, and, put my effort in this. Because those are things that you're in control of. But we constantly judge ourselves based on results that we have no control over, and then we feel less. So, sorry, that was the little monk rant at the end. All right, well, thank you so much. Really an honor to be with all of you, and hopefully there were some seeds of thought there that you can take away with you. And are we going to end with some chanting, or we are going to end? Okay, thank you very much. Give yourselves a round of applause.